Hello and welcome to ETCIO Leaders Live. I'm Sneha Jha, editor at ETCIO, and your host for the session. And I'm very pleased to be welcoming you to a particularly interesting, insightful, and informative episode of ETCIO Leaders Live. And it's easy to promise you that when the guest is Sameer Shetty, President and Head Digital Banking for Axis Bank. In this episode of ETCIO Leaders Live, which is being streamed live right now on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, we're going to be talking to Sameer about pushing the frontiers of digital banking. So let me tell you a little bit about Sameer before we get underway. Sameer has been the president and head digital banking at Axis Bank for over 2 years now. In this role, he's leading Axis Bank into a digital future where technology will play a promising and potentially profitable role in the growth of the bank. Under his stewardship, Axis Bank has launched a panoply of digital initiatives aimed at improving customer centricity and delivering on a future-forward digital approach. Sameer seems to have segued into this role pretty well. His experience over the last 15 years is firmly rooted in digital and analytics domain, having worked across geographies such as Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and India. In his previous avatar, Sameer worked with McKinsey as a partner in financial services practice. For Sameer, digital banking and customer experience are inextricably entwined. Sameer and his digital team are devoted to delivering a bigger, bolder, and better customer value proposition for Axis Bank. That is the goal Sameer is working towards, one measured step at a time. Sameer, welcome to ETCIO Leaders Live. It's an absolute delight to have you as our guest today.
Thank you, Sneha, for inviting me and for that very generous introduction. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the session as well.
It's our pleasure, Sameer. And isn't it always nice to hear how great you're doing?
Indeed, thanks a lot for that. As I said, it was very generous. So thank you
Right.
for that introduction.
Okay, so Sameer, let's start out with a high-level view first, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Sure.
What are some of the core business objectives that Axis Bank is trying to achieve with digital transformation?
Broadly, 5 things that we are aiming to achieve via our digital transformation. The first, which perhaps is where most of our time and effort has gone in, is to launch a full set of direct-to-customer digital zero operations and zero-based redesigned products. And the aspiration of launching these products is to offer a very different experience to a very different type of customers. And this is a growth agenda for the bank. So the idea is that we get more customers, we get better revenues, we get better share of wallet, and so on and so forth. And this area in the last 12 months, as an example, we've launched approximately 16 new products, which are all in different stages of scale up right now. And also there is a bunch of products that we are continuing to launch as we speak. So this is area number one. That is our focus. Area number two is to see how we can, digitally enable our frontline colleagues so that they can become more effective and more efficient at what they do. So as an example, today, if you walked into our branches, a reasonably large proportion of the time of the branch staff goes into operations activities. This is stuff like, taking paper, scanning it, checking it, validating stuff, so on and so forth. Now, our aspiration is that how can we digitally enable our colleagues so that when a customer walks in, our colleagues are focusing time on helping the customer in talking to the
Engaging
customer.
with the customers more than just
Absolutely.
handling the paperwork and the admin and all of that.
Absolutely. So that's the second phase of work. So in the last year, we've launched this big initiative called the Branch of the Future, wherein, as an example, in the last year now, 65% of the requests that go to our branches are available digitally. So customers can do it from the comfort of their homes, or even if they walked into the branches, the branch can assist the customer to do it digitally. And in that process, we take away all paperwork. We take away any manual operations at the back end as well. And so our staff can then focus on, providing advice, guiding the customer, understanding their issues, and so on and so forth. This is both a cost and a growth initiative for us. So there is obviously some cost savings because we are taking out a lot of paper, we are taking out a lot of manual work. But also, more importantly, this enables us to improve customer engagement, get better share of wallet with the customers, deepen our relationships, and that will hopefully translate into better revenues and
And
better
also,
growth.
are you looking at achieving more productivity for your frontline workforce here?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is what the growth initiative is, because
Correct.
our staff can then focus on, doing some of the more
Value-added
value-added stuff.
activities. Correct.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so this initiative, our hope is that we will be able. So, as an example, last year we changed the name of our frontline staff from customer service executives to branch relationship officers. Now,
Okay.
this is not just a change in name, right? This is an expectation that our staff are going to operate very differently, and they are going to move
Mhm.
from to relationship management, from
Mhm.
just doing service management. So that's the whole intention of this pillar number two. Uh, Pillar number three is around how we become a partner of choice for ecosystems.
Mhm.
And here we are, kind of, there's a bunch of things we are doing around making ourselves partner capable. So we have built a large number of APIs. We have a developer portal, which has already more than 150 APIs, and every day we kind of keep adding to it. We are building some solutions with partners. There are a few partnerships that we're already live. We have, as an example, our partnership with Flipkart on the card side, with
Mhm.
Google Pay on the card side, and there are many more in the offing, which will come out
Okay.
as well. And the intention
Correct.
is that how do we take the bank to where the customer is,
Mhm.
versus the customer coming to the bank.
So ease of doing
Uh,
business on different channels.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. So
Mhm.
that's a third agenda for us
Okay.
on the business side. Underlying these are two, I would say, foundational elements that we are working on. The first one is around saying how can we leverage data
Mhm.
and analytics to build some distinctive advantages, right, in this space. So how can we do underwriting
Mhm.
basis various forms of data that we have. So today, as an example, Axis Bank has our customer footprint. While our actual customers are 24 million, but our customer footprint is 140 million
Okay.
via various things, right? Like we offer, as an example, FASTag or UPI, wherein customers may not be Axis Bank customers, but they use Axis Bank handles to do these businesses. So
Mhm.
that gives us some information about some of these customers. So now, how can we do underwriting? Let's say this
Mhm.
is alternate data
Mhm.
is one big area of focus for us.
Okay.
How can you do fraud management using data and transaction data, real time transaction data is a big area of focus. How do
Mhm.
we do hyper personalization on our channels?
Mhm.
Is a very big area of focus. Actually, one of our priority initiatives is around building personalized channels and hyper personalized channels.
Okay.
And so, using data to build some of these capabilities
Mhm.
is a big priority for us.
Mhm.
And the last one, which I would say is in many ways the center of our digital strategy, is around people process technology. What
Okay.
do I mean by that? See, one of our core beliefs is that if we have to win in the digital space, we have to be a digitally native organization,
Mhm.
right? So 10 years back, banks wouldn't have outsourced their branches,
Mhm.
or they wouldn't have outsourced their risk management capabilities, right?
Correct.
In the future, in the digital space, banks can't outsource their technology development
Mhm.
because that is the core,
Core
kind of
competence. Mhm.
competence itself, and you
Right.
can't outsource your data analytics and so on and so forth. So
Mhm.
a big area that we focused on is building in-house proprietary capabilities. So we
Okay.
have a team now, across the bank, more than 1,000 people are dedicated to digital agenda, but we have a team of 300 people
Mhm.
who are digitally native. So almost 75-80% of these people come from non-banking backgrounds.
Mhm.
130 of these are actually engineers. So we have the full stack of engineering capability. We have front-end developers, back-end developers, QA, DevOps, Scrum Masters, the full set, right? That is required to build something.
Mhm.
We have a very strong design team. It's a
Mhm.
small team, but it's growing, and it is kind of comprised of people who come from, movies background
Mhm.
or digital production type of backgrounds, right? People who done VFX, etc. And these are the
Mhm.
guys who say that this is what the screen should look like, so
Mhm.
that the customer engages the best in that context. So we built this entire end-to-end capability.
Mhm.
Now we can take a product from design, which is we have product managers who can think about the business use case and so on and so forth. We
Mhm.
have designers who can think of the end-to-end journeys. We have developers who can build it. We have DevOps guys who can host it and run it and monitor it. So the entire life cycle of product can be managed in-house.
Mhm.
And this is a big area of focus for us. We've, as I said, invested a lot in the last 2 years, and
Mhm.
we'll continue to grow this capability in the coming future as well.
Okay.
So that is a long-winded answer, Sneha, to your short
Mhm,
question.
mhm. So you very beautifully listed all of the key priorities and business imperatives that you have at Axis Bank, starting from empowering your workforce to do value added activities, engaging better with customers, creating a strong data capability, and creating a multidisciplinary integration of teams for taking your digital agenda forward, and also bringing in that ease of business. Now, I'd like to delve a little deeper into this because digital is as an approach outside in and technology is inside out. So, how do you amalgamate the two to deliver on the business objectives that Axis Bank is chasing that you just mentioned, and to build a future safe data framework to ensure that your business stays on course and is aligned with your business objectives?
I think that's a great question, Sneha, and I think that goes to the heart of delivering in a digital world. So we are thinking of the solution to this in three parts, if I may kind of go down
Yes.
that route, right? So if we take a little bit of a step back, see the banking technology stack has some core systems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a core banking, core lending systems, core payments, and so on and so forth. These are time tested, heavily regulated. So there is lots of regulatory intelligence built into the systems. They need to be operated at significant scales, right? We do 50 million transactions a day. So that should give you a sense of the scale that these systems need to operate in.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these core systems where we've taken the view that these systems are, systems of record. They are systems which need to scale. They need to work, and the primary objective of these systems is that they have to offer uninterrupted service to our customers, right? And so the way we are thinking about this set of systems is to build resilience and to strengthen them, to invest them in them, so that it does the same thing, but it does it at a significantly larger scale and in an uninterrupted manner.
So, at
So
scale operations.
at scale operations, but we don't do any customizations here.
Okay.
So we said that, look, we will not touch these systems from a customer experience perspective. Let them do what they are doing, and they have to do it obviously at a much better scale, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to do it at a much better availability, latency, concurrency, etc., etc. But these are kind of for us systems of record, and they will just play that activity. We've created a middle layer, which is an API layer. So we have an ESB where we kind of host all of these. But now every system of ours talks to every other system by APIs. There are no, or there are very few now direct linkages.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire customer experience layer is kind of built on top, right?
Okay.
And that integrates with the core systems via these APIs. And that system is where we do all our innovation and so on and so forth. So to your question of outside in, inside out,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. So the inside out is our core systems which have been built. They've been there for decades, and they
Right.
will continue to remain as they will scale and so on and so forth, but there is not much tinkering we want to do there.
Okay.
Whereas we want to build this customer engagement layer, which is on top, where we bring our proprietary capabilities, our development team, our product managers, cross-functional teams, etc. So the idea there is to create agile cross-functional teams
Okay.
which work on products forever. These are not project teams. These are not
Mm-hmm.
teams that come together for 6 months and you deliver and then you disappear.
Okay.
These are cross-functional teams that live and die by the products that they
So
work
they're
on.
dedicated to a particular product.
Absolutely,
Okay.
completely dedicated. There are some people who are like compliance, etc., are not 100%, but the core guys, the development team, the product guys, the business
Mm-hmm.
guys are dedicated, and their targets are as per that product and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys are living and breathing the product, right? Every day they are looking at customer feedback, they are seeing
Right.
what worked, they looked at the funnel, and they are continuously optimizing it and making it relevant for the external world.
Mm-hmm.
And so this mixture is what helps us, what we believe will help us deliver and win in the digital world.
Okay.
Initial feedback is, initial reactions are very, very positive. Our products have scaled quite well. So we are
Mm-hmm.
hoping that this will stay and this will help us succeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you could talk a little about the data framework, the future-proof data framework that you're creating at Axis Bank, also.
Yeah, sure. So one of the benefits, while there are lots of issues of being regulated, one of the benefits is that because there is spotlight, you have to be ready for regulation in advance, right? So we've been anticipating the data privacy kind of regulation for a while, and by the way, the regulator is quite proactive in this space anyway. So So this notion of so couple of things. At first, this notion that the data of the customer is the customer's ownership, and we are custodians, so we have to kind of act in that manner is very clear, and hence what data can be shared with somebody else is very very clear. In fact, actually, that space is almost equal to zero. So it is very clear on what we can share with others, in what format, consent, and so on and so forth. Those frameworks are already ready.
Right.
We also have very clear, internal like information security guidelines on how data has to be handled. So where does data get encrypted? How does it move? What happens to data, at rest? What happens when it is moving? How do we manage that? And so on and so forth is something that we've been working on. Also, we are moving very significantly to the cloud, and I'll maybe speak about this later on as well. And one of the things that we've done there is we work with the providers, the cloud providers themselves, to create solutions that work in a banking construct. So, as an example, we worked with AWS to build this entire BYOE and BYOK capability, and we understand from them that we are perhaps amongst the first institutions to create this, and it's a joint effort between them and us, which basically says, like, when you move data to the cloud, how do you ensure that the data is encrypted, and not everybody has ability to decrypt it as well. So how do we do the key management, etc. So these kind of things we've been working on for a while, and obviously with the the Data Privacy Act and things coming into force, this will become even more important. So it continues to be an area where we continue to work on and innovate on.
Okay. All right, Sameer. So thank you. You spoke about your cloud strategy and how you are trying to build those digital native capabilities and data capabilities through, anticipating what the next move of the regulator is, and abiding by all of those, and that also helps you create a strong and sturdy, robust data framework for your organization. Now, the next question that I want to ask you is about this whole thing about the new changing paradigm in business today. We are in an era where uncertainty is a new certainty, and business environment is in a state of flux. The contours of the banking industry are being stretched beyond recognition. The entry barriers to new entrants is sufficiently reduced now, but at the same time, the technology uptake among your customers is at an all-time high now, and new pivots are emerging every quarter. So how do you ensure that your digital strategy at Axis Bank is a stake in the ground, but it's not planted so deeply as to not be malleable when the business model and the objectives change?
Again, a great question, and I think this question is linked to the previous question as well, which is the outside in, inside out. So, so look, I think the thing to keep in mind here is a couple of things, right? One, that as you rightly said, the business environment is changing very, very rapidly. And so there are times when we launch something and we not anticipated that that thing would be a huge success, and it turns out to be a blockbuster, right? At the same time, there are things that we've been working on for a while, we believe it's great and so on and so forth, and we launch it and we don't see as much enthusiasm in customers as we'd expected. So we are living in a world where it is almost impossible to predict when what will work, and so we have to be in this mode of, let's launch many things, and if something works, then we scale it very rapidly. If something doesn't work, then we kind of sunset it or kill it.
Test fast, fail fast, sort of.
Yeah, scale fast, fail fast kind of a philosophy. The many jargons. So yeah, one of these in the new world: scale fast, fail fast. So now, to do this, what is important? It's important that we are able to do many low-cost experiments, right? So that we are not investing massively into something, and that if we kill it, then we have like a big, write-off. But at the same time, we are able to do many things, and we can, once we see success, we can then scale them very, very significantly, right? And this is where again this two-speed kind of architecture becomes very important, because the real investment is in the core systems, which is where you have to ensure the stability and so on and so forth. So, and the idea hence is that those stay irrespective of what product we create. Though the core systems remain, we don't kind of tweak them any dramatically, and then we create these agile teams who are cross-functional agile teams who are looking at a very specific problem, developing something, trying it out. It works great, doesn't work, then try something else and then move on, and so on and so forth. And that again, for us, it's worked quite well. So we are hoping that it'll continue to work for us. Obviously, these are early days and there are many challenges, and we have to see how this progresses.
So, Samir, you launched a lot of initiatives during the pandemic era. You got into contactless payments and WhatsApp banking, where you saw huge success within the 6 months of its launch. You almost touched a customer base of 1 million, and you also launched wear and pay devices for contactless payments. So, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in digital banking? What are some of the evolving trends in the post-pandemic era?
So look, I think pandemic obviously was extremely unfortunate that we had to go through that, but it has been a kind of a pivotal moment in the digital evolution.
Correct.
I think it's very clear that the digital agenda has received maybe a couple of years at least of a head start because of the pandemic.
Right.
So let me share a couple of anecdotes just to bring this to life, right?
Sure.
I think the number one shift that has happened is in the mindsets, right? And it is both internal and external. So I'll give you an example. Prior to the pandemic, there was a very, there were a handful set of people in our bank who could work from home. Because there were lots of considerations, right? Security considerations and so on and so forth of can you provide access to people to work from home, to systems so that they can work from home. And so it was only very, very critical guys or very, very critical systems for which this was enabled. Okay. And this was in the 2 digits, by the way. This number of people was in the double digit figure for a bank which has a employee strength of almost 90,000 people. 2 weeks from when the pandemic happened, so by I think around 10th of April, we had approximately 35,000 people working from home. Okay. Right. So in 2 weeks, we were able to move from like double digits to
the forced
5
march
digits.
To the digital workplace.
Yes, absolutely right. And what happened? The kind of the big change was in mindsets. The big change was that earlier we were asking the question of should we do for work from home, can we do work from home, etc. And actually, we did not even ask the question because this question was not even under consideration that can we work from home or should we? But in those 2 weeks, we moved from that space to saying that, look, people have to work from home and the bank has to operate. Banking is essential service, right? We cannot kind of shut down the bank. So now how do we make it happen? And the moment the question moved from should we to how do we, in 2 weeks, not only was the answer apparent, the execution happened and people were already working from home. And that's without the pandemic, this would have taken us, I don't know, 5 years maybe to get to this, right? And the same, by the way, is on the customer side. Like earlier, let's say if you wanted a checkbook, lots of our customers would walk into the branch. Now they ask the question of, in this pandemic environment, for a checkbook, when I can get it on 2 clicks on my app, do I need to go to the branch and expose myself to maybe 50 people, who are there and, I don't know where they've been and so on and so forth. And so the adoption of digital has seen a fairly big shift, and the openness of people to use digital has seen a fairly big shift. So as an example, about a year and a half, 2 years back, the contribution of digital to new mutual fund sales for our bank was in the single digit percentages. Today, that is 60%.
Correct.
Right. So we moved from single digit percentages to 60% in a matter of like 18 months approximately. And there are lots of things that we've done to get there, but the customer acceptance is a big factor as well in this shift happening.
So a acceleration both from your work within your workforce and also in your customer base, right? An acceleration of technology.
Absolutely. Right. And I think we were very fortunate that technology was at a level where we could make many of these shifts happen, right? So
that's very critical.
Absolutely. So as an example, on the work from home, our entire work from home suite is on the cloud. And it is because it's on the cloud, we've been able to move so rapidly. Had it been on-prem, it would have been quite tough. Now that technology was there, we were prepared to go there. And so all of those things mattered as well. But there was a big mindset shift in the pandemic. You mentioned WhatsApp and wearables and so. So WhatsApp, as an example, we are now at 1.5 million customers. And these are customers who are not just registered, right? They're using it. We can see the activity, and it's quite encouraging to see the level of activity that exists on WhatsApp as well. So I think across multiple things that we've done, we are seeing digital adoption go up quite dramatically.
Mhm. So WhatsApp banking is very fast emerging as the next frontier of delivering financial services. It's been a very successful experiment in Africa as well, where the population of unbanked was very high. The mobile penetration was high, and it's also helped reduce the cost of customer acquisition there. It simplified the customer journeys, increased customer loyalty and engagement. How do you see this evolving in India? What is the sort of scope that you see for WhatsApp banking in India?
The way we think about this is just digital adoption across channels is kind of going up very rapidly,
Mhm.
and WhatsApp is a very convenient channel, and it's a very
Correct.
comfortable
There's
channel because
familiarity with the app, and so adoption is
absolutely,
much easier.
absolutely right. Like so, I kind of keep telling this that a year and a half back, my mother would use her smartphone like a feature phone. She would only make calls, right? But today she's very active
Right,
on our family WhatsApp groups and
right.
so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
it's a channel that many people who are even digitally not
Correct.
very comfortable are comfortable
Hmm.
using.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so asking a message of hi, what's my balance, or
Hmm.
whatever else is fairly convenient. So
Right.
we are actually quite optimistic about this channel because the channel itself has seen significant adoption. WhatsApp itself has
Hmm.
seen, chat in general has seen very significant adoption, right? And
Hmm.
people are using
Hmm.
it. So we believe it will help break barriers for a different set of customers to kind of come in and use it as well, as
Right.
well as the kind of the younger generation seems to be more comfortable doing things on chat. So we are
That's right.
quite optimistic.
Hmm.
Again, for us, it is one way. So like our WhatsApp banking customers are also on mobile. It's not like they're different people. The same guys are
Hmm.
using a mobile app. They're also using WhatsApp, and they're
Hmm.
also using other channels, right? So it's one more way of us to get to the customer, and every medium that we have is an important medium. So we will
Correct.
continue to look at this quite positively. Obviously, kind of regulations and etc. have to be taken into consideration.
Mhm, mhm. It's very interesting that you spoke about both the generations of this age spectrum that you have within your customer base, where you said that the senior citizens are also latching on to this opportunity, and the millennials, in any case, are very comfortable. And I'd like to share an anecdote with you. Before the pandemic, my parents were also very apprehensive about using these platforms, but during the pandemic, in fact, my daughter taught them how to use Paytm and a lot of
Right,
these payment
right,
options. So
right.
that way it's a reverse mentoring of sorts that's happening in
Yeah.
the customer base. That's very
Yes.
interesting. So Samir, how are you building systems that can handle more transaction value, since you're so focused on UPI, and what role do you see emerging technologies play here?
Again, I would say a critical and a central question on for our digital success. So this theme, we call it resilience,
Mhm.
right? Which one component of it is what you mentioned, which is transaction volumes and scaling and so on and so forth. But the broader theme of resilience, which is saying that how do we ensure that our critical systems are available 24/7, and they have good performance, failures are low, and so on and so forth, is a big theme for us. And there are a few things we are doing there. Number one is this migration to cloud. So we are actually, we would like to believe that we are amongst the leaders as far as cloud adoption is concerned in this country. In fact, recently at the AWS Summit, our CEO was a keynote speaker as well. So just goes to kind of demonstrate the amount of work that we've done here. So approximately a year back, year and a half back, we kind of made a big decision to embrace cloud, moving beyond small experiments, right? So in the last year, every customer facing new product that we've launched is on the cloud. It's a cloud native product.
Mhm.
And we have set an aspiration that in 2 years, 70% of our apps will move to the cloud.
Mhm.
Uh, so that this cloud and cloud transformation is a big agenda for us.
Okay.
And obviously, one of there are two, three benefits of the cloud. The first one is actually the ability to scale and
Mhm.
to kind of provide services. Let's say if suddenly volumes
On
go up
demand.
on demand and so on and so
Mhm.
forth, the
Mhm.
cloud can help us do that. There are
Mhm.
other benefits, which is agility and ability to kind of use other services and so on and so
Correct.
forth as well, which also are equally important. But cloud is a big component of to the question that you asked of how do we ensure scale and so on and so forth. So that's one big work we are doing. The second thing we are doing is investing in some very critical systems so that we can make them ready for better volumes and scale and so on and so forth. So as an example, last year we did a big investment around our UPI. So we now have a parallel core system for UPI. Our UPI transactions don't hit our core banking, because what was happening was the volumes were so high that not only was it impacting the UPI transactions, it was impacting other transactions as well, because it was one system that was handling. So now we've created almost like a segregated core, and this happened in, I think, October of last year. And since then, our UPI failure rates have come down quite dramatically. Now UPI is
Can you add a number to it? What sort of a difference have you seen in the failure rates? How dramatically have they come down?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but if the average failure rates of in banking is X%, we are at 1/6 of X or something of that nature. So very significantly kind of improved performance we've had on the UPI front. Now the thing is that UPI is a very evolving. It's not this one-time thing doesn't work. Gone are the days that you do something and kind of forget it, right? So there'll be more things. There are a few other big things that are happening in this space, and they will come live as well, and we'll continue to do that. So that's the second type of thing. We just take some core systems and see what we can do to enhance and improve the performance of those systems. The third is this in this resilience is just see when systems go down, very often the issues are the ones that you never imagined that those will be the issues. So you figure out some component, something somewhere has failed, and you've never even known that component existed, as an example, right? So what we are doing is we are taking a full end-to-end view, which starts from the hardware side, let's say infrastructure, DR, DC, and how that is managed and so on and so forth, power, etc., moves on to the apps, like do we have any end of life, end of service kind of apps, and how do we sunset and how do we migrate to a more better and consolidated app system so that enough attention can be paid to everything. To some of the more advanced I would say resilience way of doing things. So how do we ensure zero data loss in the case that something goes wrong, and so there's some stuff of that nature. And to governance, which is who's bothered about this, who's looking at this, what data do we have about various systems, how are we tracking it, and when it goes down, then what happens, where does the red signal go, can we get a signal before, like 5 minutes before it goes down, so that we can predict. So this entire set of things, there's a lot of activity that's happening, and we are, again, there's a long way to go, but we are hopeful that we will be able to get to a good outcome.
Interesting. That's interesting. And congratulations on some of those initiatives around UPI.
Thank you.
So the next thing that I want to understand from you is that, digital age presents a lot of opportunities and also some challenges. Now, the fact is that, the base services for all banks are similar in terms of your core banking system, the cards and mobile and internet banking apps, and the other services that most banks offer. So that differentiator has been lost. Now, analytics could be the most important competitive differentiator for any bank in this digital age. So that has to be brought into the picture, and that's where the new set of opportunities have to be realized. But on the other hand, there's a challenge that the customer expectations are at an all-time high, and they need seamless customer experience. So how can analytics be leveraged to overcome this challenge through more customization, consistency across channels, and creating a hyper-personalized offering that is compelling and relevant to your customers? You spoke about this in your first response, but if you could delve a little deeper into this.
Yeah, sure. So I would say a couple of things there. First is that it is actually, quite eye-opening that how much difference can small changes in customer experience make to any journey. And there are many examples of this wherein we maybe changed a button, or we've kind of changed the screen, or we've changed the positioning of something in the screen, and we see fairly significant changes in the way customers behave and they engage with us. So this, I would say this, kind of right now it's an art, but evolving into a science of thinking of customer journeys and making them simple and easy for customers. I think all banks have gone through a couple of cycles, but we are all collectively, there is a long way for us to go.
Mhm.
And it's a never-ending thing. By the way, it's not like we will finish it and
Right,
we'll move
right.
on.
It's a moving target.
So yeah, so the product is the same. The savings account is a savings account. A credit card is a credit card, and whatever
Mhm.
else is a loan, and so on and so forth. But the performance differentiation within our bank itself, as an example, between a journey that is well created and
Mhm.
well suited to customers versus one which is maybe average,
Mhm.
is quite stuck.
Right.
And so there is a lot of value there. So that is number one. And
Mhm.
analytics is an important one here because you need to know, actually, unless you
Mhm.
know customer drop off at every point, at every screen, why it is happening, what time, etc., which type of customer, you will not be able. So there is a play for analytics there, but there is also a play for just design thinking, technology, etc. That time. So that
Mhm.
is one part of your to the first part of your question on analytics itself. I think it is already, and it will continue to be a really central and core differentiating element
Mhm.
in digital strategy of various institutions.
Mhm.
Uh, and so there are multiple angles in which it plays.
Mhm.
There are three actually in our minds which are very important, and we are doing a lot of work there. The first one is underwriting, which is how do we underwrite folks
Mhm.
without having the full transaction data? Can we use alternate data?
Okay.
And today there is a lot of information available, right?
Mhm.
In a very kosher form. So customers
Mhm.
are happy to share that information with you.
Mhm.
So using with consent of customers, how do we use alternate data to underwrite and to provide credit to customers who would otherwise have not gotten it? Is a
Mhm.
big area
So
of focus for us.
assessing the credit worthiness.
Yes.
And how does it help you bring down the risk of bad loans? Because that's a big problem for banks.
No. Uh, you know, 5 years back,
Mhm.
no bank would have been able to give a 500 rupee loan.
Mhm.
It was impossible because the cost of giving the loan was more than 500 rupees,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Today, like as an example, we've launched a buy now pay later product
Mhm.
where the kind of the total outstanding is 5,000 rupees a month, but
Okay.
the average ticket size is like 150 rupees. So every
Mhm.
loan is like 100. It accumulates, but every loan is like 150 rupee loan. And the reason we are able to do it is A, our OPEX has gone down because of digital, and B, because we've been able to underwrite folks who earlier we were not able to underwrite. So today we have 21 models which are on new to bank customers, and they are working live to
Mhm.
underwrite these guys. And these are all new to Axis Bank, so we don't have transaction data about them, but
Mhm.
we know something else about them, and so we
Mhm.
are using that something else to do the underwriting and get these guys in. And the
Mhm.
risk, again, these are very early days, but the risk performance seems to be okay. It doesn't seem out of whack at all. So
Mhm.
these models are providing us some insights into how customers operate.
Right.
And so that's a big area of work, which is how do we get access to alternate data and how do we use that alternate data to underwrite. It's a
Okay.
big area of work for us. The second big area of work we refer to is personalization.
Right.
And kind of one of our priorities in this year and next year
Mhm.
is to make our channels personalized. So
Okay.
today, as an example, let's say you open your app and I open my app, we would more or less say the same things. There are a few things which
Mhm.
are personalized, but 90% of the app is same.
Remains the same.
But tomorrow, or tomorrow meaning maybe 4, 5, 6 months down the line, when you open your app, you will see something that's personalized to you. So it would say,
Mhm.
as an example, that Sneha, uh, your SIP is coming up, and so your account doesn't have enough money. Why don't you fund it? Maybe
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
one kind of thing, right? To me, it could say that your KYC is outdated now. Why don't you kind of update your KYC? To a third
So
person, it could
immediate financial needs and requirements of the
absolutely.
customer and an update on all of these.
Absolutely. And there
Mhm.
is enough that we know about cohorts of customers to provide them some personalized. So, as an example, I could tell you, if you were a customer of the bank, I could tell you, Sneha, that people like you are investing 30% more than you in SIPs.
Mhm.
Right now, do you want to reconsider? Like, do you want to think about your financial plan and do something? Now, this is interesting information to provide
Mhm.
to you because you can then
Right.
action and do something about it, right?
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of data that financial institutions have
Mhm.
by lieu of being, banks kind of having the accounts of customers.
Mhm.
Now the question is, how can we leverage that to create something that is meaningful for the customers and then show it to them? And that's another priority that our analytics team is working on. So that's the second area. And the
Mhm.
third area is broadly around fraud, and how do we manage fraud, and in a real time basis, how can we work on that? Is a third area also that our analytics team is working on.
Okay. Okay, all right. Now, Sameer, what are some of the immediate digital projects that you're working on under the vectors of growth and profitability and competitive differentiation? If you could give us a little peek into the future and tell us what are some of the key, projects that you're leading at Axis Bank right now.
Sure. So there's a very large variety, but let me talk about a few just to kind of give you a sense, right? So the first one on the growth side, we already launched this buy now pay later, but there is a broader theme of seeing how do we do acquisition using small ticket lending.
Mm-hmm.
Is something that it's a problem that we are working on. There are a few things we are planning here, which includes, like the objective is that historically we've been we kind of acquire savings accounts and then cross sell various products to those savings accounts. We want to experiment to see that can we acquire customers via small ticket loans, and then either migrate them to larger ticket loans, or then bring our savings accounts and other products to them. So this can only happen digitally. It can't happen in other formats. And here digital, the entire set of digital, which is the design, the product proposition, the technology, as well as the analytics, all come together, because we need to have the alternate underwriting here to be able to succeed. So this is one area that we are working on.
Okay.
The second area we are working on is on small businesses. Like how do we get to small businesses? Again, using alternate data and so on and so forth, right? So small businesses are massively underpenetrated in this country from a financial services perspective.
Correct.
And our view is that in the next decade, small businesses will be what happened to consumers in the last decade. So consumer lending in the last decade kind of went through a massive boom across the banking sector. We expect the same to happen to small business in the coming decade, because there is now information about them. It's easier to access them using digital and so on and so forth. So that's the second area that we are working on. This is on the growth side. On the profitability side, obviously these things automatically kind of help on the profitability side. But there are a bunch of other things that we're working. So as an example, we launched our digital savings account acquisition about 9-10 months back. Last September, I think is when we, so yeah, 11 months back actually. So now our cost of acquiring an account using our digital mode is 35% lesser compared to the physical mode. And already a very significant proportion of our accounts are being acquired digitally. So, and we see this benefit across like multiple things we do on this mutual funds, personal loans. Personal loans, our cost of acquiring a customer digitally is 80% lower compared to a physically acquired customer. And already 60% of our personal loans are acquired digitally. Right. So we see this significant benefit on the cost, on the profitability side as well come through when we move to digital. And this entire branch of the future that I spoke about, wave 1 is done, but we are now on to wave 2, and there'll be a wave 3, wave 4, etc., which will all help us on the profitability front. And the last is the customer experience and engagement
competitive differentiation
kind of a front as well. So so one is this notion of the new version of our channels, new version of a mobile app, and new version of our internet banking, which will be newer age look and feel, but also
when can we expect some of those offerings?
So the first version should go live in the next 4 weeks, 4-6 weeks. But the more like the one with the real personalization, etc., is somewhere around the end of this fiscal year. So Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year is when we will have the real kind of hyper personalized and so on and so forth. So that's coming. And on the competitive advantage side, this notion of building proprietary capabilities is something that we are very, very convinced about, and we'll continue to invest on. Our team has grown from 60 people in 2 years back to 300 people now, and that rate of growth will continue. So we are continuing to hire, engineering staff, product staff, design folks, and so on and so forth, so that we can really build a strong proprietary capability in-house and continue to deliver on our ambitions.
Okay. All right. Sameer, we are getting a question from one of our viewers in Mumbai. He wants to know, how are you looking at RPA to drive business efficiency at Axis Bank?
Yeah. So look, RPA is a very, very critical component in our overall repertoire of things that we are doing on the technology and digital front. See, one of the things that one of the views we've taken is that we will not be technology led. So like we don't pick up RPA because RPA is great. We pick up a problem statement, which is, let's say,
Right. How
we
it
have to open
applies
an
to
account.
your business case.
Absolutely. Let's say we have to open an account. Now, to open an account, we have to read a document, and to read a document, we need RPA. So, kind of RPA comes in, right? And so that's the approach we've taken. Having said that, we've been on this RPA journey almost for, I think, 4 years now. So there's a lot. There are about 900 bots that we have built, again, mostly built in-house, and they help us do the automation of multiple small processes. And so in all the digital journeys that I spoke of, or not in all, but in a very large number of the digital journeys that I spoke of, RPA is a critical component. So let's say you want to change your address. Now you upload your driving license or your voter's ID card. Then I need the ability to read that. And then, I need the ability to correct, like it's not always very legible. And so I need to kind of do some prediction on top. And I need to do the check that, if you have uploaded your voter ID, the name there actually is yours and it is not mine.
For KYC details and all.
For KYC details and so on and so forth. So we use RPA very extensively for things like that. We use RPA very extensively for automation of standard processes. So lots of these, recon processes,
standard repetitive
processes. We use RPA a lot. So yeah. So again, it's a area where I would say a lot has to be done for us to claim victory. But RPA is already very kind of integral part of many of the things that we do today.
The next question is coming in from Delhi, and the viewer wants to know, how are you looking at security holistically to secure all your apps and services at Axis Bank?
I think it's I would say if there are 3 questions to ask on the digital front today, this is one of them.
Security is one of them.
Security is one of them. And the second one is resilience. And the third one is this customer experience and, how do we kind of adopt, right? So I think, by the way, one of the things the pandemic has done is, because there has been so much migration from, physical to digital, the sensitivity to digital risk has also
increased,
correspondingly gone up, right? And it's an area that we really need to ensure that we have a handle on for digital to succeed, because it's very easy to lose confidence of people.
The attack surface is so much more wide now.
Absolutely, it's much wider, and the fraudsters are very, very innovative people, right? So they are 3 steps
always a rat. Cat and mouse game.
Yeah, absolutely. So hence this security is a super critical one. And that's again on our priority list of how we do various things. So we have actually a very strong InfoSec team, which takes charge of security. And for us, securities, there are three kind of blocks in which we think about security. First is policy, which is, there are some policies that if you build something, it has to adhere to X, Y, Z, 2-factor authentication has to be there in everything, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a policy front. Second is the code and the code quality, right? Like like how good is your tech? Does it have holes? Does it have gaps? And is it hackable? And so on and so forth is the second one. And the third part is the monitoring one, which is that you may have the best policy, you may have the best software, but like is somebody at this point in time trying to enter and trying to do something, and so on and so forth. Unless you have that, 1 and 2 are not going to save you. So you need to have all 3, right? So on policy, there is like this team, which is our risk team, and the InfoSec team are continuously working on various things, and they keep coming up with policies. Most of them I do not like personally, because it creates problems for us in terms of development and so on and so forth, but we have to do it, right? So a policy is a policy, and we just have to kind of adhere by that.
Correct.
The second one is where we made a fairly significant shift, which is we've now moved to what we call DevSecOps, which is security is integrated into the development process. And so it is all automated. So we have tools which are automated. So the minute the guy writes his code and checks it in, he will get some feedback saying, look, this quality code is not good, or, here are some bugs, and so on and so forth. So the development, the information security testing, and the functional testing happens real time while the guy is writing the code, right? And then we have some, when we move to on the CI/CD pipeline, when we move it to production as well, there are some we have some systems which look at overall holistic, not just the code quality, but overall, from an infra perspective, are there other things happening? Some outdated tools we are using, or there are some IPs which are open to the internet. All those things are checked automatically, and those reports are generated, so that we don't get to know of infosec issues 3 months after the development is
Exactly,
over,
yeah.
right? And when we are
Proactively
going production,
monitoring them.
it is real time, it is on the fly. So
Mm.
that's the big shift that we made on the development and the code quality front.
Mhm.
And also because it is fully automated,
Mm.
the quality is also kind of really good, right? Because it's not a person kind of looking at it, and there is no people dependency here.
Mm.
So that's on the second. And
Mhm.
the third is on the monitoring. Again, it's an area where I mean, banks have been traditionally good. We've had lots of tech systems which are doing this, but it's an area where we are continuing to make some more investments, and as we learn. So, as an
Mhm.
example, in our latest app upgrade, we made some fairly significant investments on which just help information security,
Mm.
and kind of take away some big ways of fraud that are committed
Mhm.
digitally.
Okay.
So that's a third thing. So information security is very critical to us. There
Mhm.
is the reason it works well is because we have this central governance. We have a
Mhm.
information security committee, which is a very senior committee in the bank, and it looks at this on a monthly basis on various
Right.
elements, and we kind of keep moderating.
Mhm. Okay. I think that question kind of closed the loop very well, because that was one of the key imperatives of digital that we touched upon with that question. Now, Sameer, there is a thread through this conversation about customer centricity, customer experience, the ease of doing business, and a lot of innovations that you are creating around it, how you are preparing your technology foundation to enable all of these customer centric innovations. And I have a very strong urge to ask you this question. Now, as a bank, when you offer financial services that are seamlessly embedded and integrated into the lifestyle of your customer, whether it is through WhatsApp banking or social payment apps or wearable contactless devices or wallets, um, you're engaging with the customer in a very intuitive and invisible manner without the customer even having to go to a branch or meet someone from the bank. So how do banks then maintain that delicate balance between being seamless in the life of their customers, but at the same time retain that brand resonance and the brand context, because that again is very critical as a business.
No, I think it's a it's a very very critical question, and I'll be very honest. All answers are not clear on this one, right? And we have many of these discussions, particularly when you talk about partnerships. We have many of these discussions around, where is the bank brand versus the partner brand, and
Mm.
so on and so forth. But I think a couple of things are very important, which is one is, see, for the finally the customer wants some service delivered to him or her,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Whether it is a loan or an account or a new checkbook or whatever else, like
Correct.
emotional balance, whatever else, there is some service that the customer wants delivered. Some customers would like to do it on WhatsApp. Some customers would like to do it on the app. Some customers may actually want to go to the branch,
Mm.
for whatever reasons, right? People may want to walk into the branch, and hence, at least our view to this is that we are not going to kind of direct the customer
Mm.
that you come here or you go there or you can't do this or you can't do that,
To
right?
each his own.
To each his own, and we will hence be available.
Mm.
So if you would, Sneha, want to walk into your neighborhood branch, you're most welcome. Please come. Please meet our staff. And they will help you with whatever you have. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to walk to the branch and you want to do it on your app, please go ahead and do it. If you want to do it on WhatsApp, please kind of do it there. If you want to do it on, so basically the idea is that we will make the service accessible to the customer via multiple channels,
Mhm.
and then kind of leave it to the customer to figure out wherever she or he wants to go and try it.
Mhm.
And our view is that if we can make the service omni-channel, which is that when you walk into the branch, you should get the same experience that you get on the app,
Mhm.
and vice versa. And if that experience is really good,
Mhm.
if you are kind of doing it in a way that you are able to do whatever you want to do in the least amount of time,
Mhm.
and you don't see it as a necessary evil that oh, now I have to log into an app.
Mhm.
You should not have that reaction. If you're able to
Mhm.
do that, then everything else will take care of itself.
And what
The
about the
brand
millennial
and
customers who would like to bank with a faceless bank, that where they don't have to go to a branch? And of course, you have services and apps and a lot of other financial products for them. But how do you engage with them as a brand?
So I think this is not just for millennials. I think
Mhm.
in general, across any customer segment, age-wise, geography-wise, income-wise, etc., a very large proportion of customers today interact, including like with our bank as an example,
Mhm.
only digitally,
Correct.
right? They walk into the branch when they have a big problem.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people don't walk in. Like, why would you walk into a branch otherwise, right? Like,
Correct.
So this is not a millennial problem. This is
Mhm.
a thing with every
Across
individual
different
across
customer
different
age
customers.
groups, age
Yeah,
profiles.
but look, the good news is that if you think about e-commerce brands as an example, they have no physical presence, right? But they have
Mhm.
great brand recall and they have
Correct.
great
Correct.
kind of customer relationship and so
Right.
on and so
Right.
forth. And there is no reason why we believe that we can't have the same, which is
Mhm.
we can deliver very good experience on our digital channels.
Mhm.
And if you're able to do that, then you
That's a
know,
very interesting point, because that's something that the banks can definitely pick up from the
yeah.
e-commerce companies. That's
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think for most banks, by the way, not just ours, this notion of the digital only customer is perhaps today a significantly larger proportion of their base compared to the branch only customer.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Samir, for joining me today. It's been really great conversation. It was so interesting talking to you. Thanks once again for sharing your perspective on a host of topics ranging from customer experience to technology resilience to ecosystem play and also future trends. An hour has gone by so quickly. A big thank you to our audience for listening in and sharing your questions with Samir. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Samir as much as I did. And I hope you also found it very informative and insightful, as I had promised at the start of our episode. I'll be back next week with another interesting episode of ETCIO Leaders Live. Follow us on social media to find out who's our guest for the next week. Until then, this is your host, Sneha Jha, signing off.